在を卒業時半や腹見た自証券法保育同一細工役者利子式具意空空意識式即税空空即税式重装業薬部尿税者利子税証法空総務証法空空空上空増減税航空中部式部創業式無限に微税式無式証拠未足無限界内し無意識外無無明薬無無明人内し無老死薬無老死人無復讐滅動無知薬無得意無常無公母大三角暗夜荒見た方針無定義無定義無空音理最善の無即業で安税小物へ暗夜荒見た方裏の歌三脈三宝大高知暗夜荒見た税大二種税大名種税無上種税無行動種無常一切具真実無法説暗夜荒見た種節種圧ギャテギャテあギャテあそうギャテ法理そわか暗夜神
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and returning to the temple is our good friend from Hoodwinked Games, man behind formerly Blade, then Basic and Generic, now Pen, in the TTRPG sense. And a while back, we had visited the Wargame expansion to that. Although I think that was right in the middle of the name change. The one and only
Yeah.
Josiah Mork. How you doing today, man?
Wow, what an introduction. I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. I never really thought about how long it took to get to where we are until you kind of gave them the 30-second rundown there.
Yeah,
What a ride.
you and I started trading words with each other all the way back in the days of the Blade RPG.
Oh gosh, what a first attempt.
A lot of times the first thing you do sucks.
Hey, we all got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah. That's why I appreciate the think like an engineer thing that like Mark Rober does, where he's basically like, don't bother worrying about whether or not you're going to fail. It's gonna happen. Just learn from it and try again.
It's honestly so true. I've talked to a lot of people in the space who just never actually put out a game because they're just so worried that it won't be as good as it is in their head. And honestly, we've been doing this like 5 years now, 5 or 6 years now.
Mm-hmm.
I think the last game that I came out with and then this next one are the first ones that are as good on paper as they were in my head. So hey, I mean, it takes some time, and I'm sure 5 years from now I'll look back and cringe on these two, but it's all about creating some fun for people, huh?
If I had the original documents, I'd probably release the Legend Wars card game that I made in high school just so I can show how far I've come, because dear Lord, was that a bad idea.
Hey, but now you know.
Yeah, and to quote a certain show, knowing is half the battle.
Exactly. The other half is lasers.
So I will. So when it came to this concept, the origin story of doing this was when I had done a previous episode of the Geek Watch podcast exploring the idea of bringing Halo into wargaming. There was that one attempt from a few years ago that didn't go anywhere. I've heard that there was another attempt, but you'll forgive me if I'm a little bit cautious about whether or not that's even going to go anywhere, and it looks like that's going bigger scale than I think is appropriate.
Oof.
But the idea of doing Halo or any sort of high mobility arena shooter in a war game, I think is a concept that hasn't been fully explored a lot, uh, for various reasons. Some of the reasons I don't agree with, but they do happen. Uh, Now, when I initially did it, I had worked with a core mechanic of roll 2d10, keep the highest. If you get matches, you get some extra effect, i.e., if you roll doubles.
Mm-hmm.
But that was something I did because I didn't have a foundation when going with the concept. For this, we have a concept, that being the rule set of um base not I almost called it basic and generic old habits of Pan Wargame.
Yes,
So
sir.
I realized that I'm more familiar with Halo than you were in this case. I will note, for the purposes of this, we are only concerning ourselves with Combat Evolved, Halo 2 and 3, and ODST. Everything else is off the table. Actually,
Right.
that's a partial lie. I forgot about Reach.
Oh no. Folks, for context, anybody who's listening, I have played all of 4 missions of a Halo. I think it was Halo 2. So if I say anything stupid, as I tend to do, please offer me a small bit of mercy. We have been researching, watching the videos, looking through the forums, all that fun stuff.
Mhm.
But I will be relying greatly on our dear friend Mildred here to guide me through the Halo aspect while I guide through the war game aspect.
Yeah.
And maybe we can come up with something cool.
So I think before we even tackle any individual units, I think the first thing to make explicitly clear is that this is in the direction of skirmish scale.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for those unfamiliar, the difference between skirmish and full-on wargame scale is a matter of units. In a skirmish, I'd say most skirmish armies are going to cap off at maybe 12 units. You're not going to have a whole army's worth of units. You're going to have the equivalent of a squad. Sometimes you might have more if you've got a bunch of cheaps. The tar pit strategy is a well-known thing.
Mm-hmm.
These
are kind of, from my background of like Warhammer, these are kind of like your kill teams and your Necromundas, right?
Yeah, kill team, Necromunda, Mordheim. That's the kind of scale this would be shooting for. Maybe Blood Bowl as well, but Blood Bowl is a different beast. Although,
yeah,
I will know as a bit of an aside, I've always been a bit disappointed with the fact that the video game versions of Blood Bowl just decided to just straight adapt the board game.
Oh. Is it like a just a digital simulator basically?
Yeah, it's just a digital version of the board game, whereas I feel like what should have been done, if you're going to do Blood Bowl in a video game sense, is akin to like NFL Blitz back in the day or Mutant League Football.
I'd love even to see like a Madden but Blood Bowl.
We had something close when Mutant League Football got reincarnated as Mutant Football League, legally distinct. And every single one of the team names is some parody of an existing NFL team because, well, Blood Bowl itself had its own deity watching over it called Niffle, NFL.
Oh, that's clever. I didn't know about that.
Because, and all that Blood Bowl is just taking the Warhammer fantasy races and having them playing American football.
Mm-hmm. It's literally fantasy football, and I love it.
Yeah, with all these shenanigans that can happen when you have orc linebackers, for instance.
Good stuff. I'm still yet to play a game, but every time I go into the hobby store, I'm like, one of these days, because they just have such fun, flavorful miniatures, and I do love me some miniatures. That's part of actually why I created the war game.
Yeah,
is so that you can find your fun, flavorful miniatures and put them on the table and still do cool things with them, even if Blood Bowl or whatnot's not your fave.
Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna say it's not my fave. I just think that the video game version played things too straight. Uh,
Yeah.
I had said a similar thing with the Marvel anime project some years back, right? It was like you put too much Marvel into the project and not put enough anime.
Mm,
Like it just felt like the kind of stories I would have read in the comic books. I guess they
gotcha.
I
Just
guess
kind of repeating the
yeah.
same experience.
I think it's because they got teased due to the teaser having like a Wolverine that was shot in the style of like Ninja Scroll, or I
That
think
takes skill right
like
there.
one of the other teasers was Iron Man, but using the Itano circus kind of camera techniques, the missile spam circus that you've seen in like Macross.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, it doesn't sound very consistent with their like typical style.
yeah, but like if you're gonna bring it, if the selling point is having an anime studio handling Marvel characters, uh, let the guys cook.
It seems like a classic case of like you don't actually know what you're going for. Like they take a famous product and they're like, we're gonna target it to this audience, and then a different audience is unhappy about that, and they're like, oh, well, we'll like mix it up a little bit to be like you guys, and then the original audience is like, bro, what the heck? And then they just end up with a puddle of goo that nobody really wants.
You know,
Maybe I'm a cynic, but I feel like a lot of brands are doing that these days.
um, some are, some are, some aren't. I always encourage people to not fall into the trap of performative cynicism, as we call it.
Mm.
But because of that, since we're on the skirmish tier, on the
Mhm.
war game end of things, are there any things that we need to take into account before we even make any units? Since we're putting our line in the sand that this is skirmish scale armies.
Yeah, so we'd have to kind of decide how big of an encounter we want to go. So Pen bakes in four different recommended battle sizes. So the first is a duel, which is literally just like a 1v1,
Mm-hmm.
or it'd be kind of like your Spartan versus Hunter type vibe. Or if you really wanted to, knock it down a little bit, you could do like some Space Marines versus like a Hunter or something.
Mm-hmm.
But the each unit can have a max of 200 and I think it's 250 points. So that's not even one full strength unit. So it's going to be pretty small, really fast, very much like a duel. Then your next battle size option is an encounter, which is 350 points. So that's going to be like one full strength unit and then a couple kind of supporting Griblies, or a few like two, three, maybe four smaller, weaker squads that you could kind of have some flexibility around.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd probably lean towards the encounter because then, if you want to do one really jacked guy, you could do that. But typically, most units, once you build them, fall somewhere in the 75 to 150 point range. And so that gives you two or three cool ones that you could work with.
I feel like in this case the army size should be somewhere in the middle between encounters might be a little bit too small. Clashes is definitely too big. What would you would you say like 500 points would be a nice middle ground?
Yeah, you could definitely shoot for 500. The reason we did it is kind of like a little bit too small, kind of like you pointed out, like 100 or 350 is a little small, and then 1500 clash is a little big. Because once you open up that lens, then you might end up with a bit of an imbalance in how the armies are built, because you can't. There's a lot more room to like either really concentrate your points or really spread your points, and so you kind of have to be on the same page with your opponent, unless you're at the 1500 point where you can overwhelm any powerful unit they have, or your powerful unit can really stomp their army before it dies.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of the thought behind it, but we definitely could make like a 500 point army and just kind of have that in mind, that we're going to be looking at pretty balanced
Yeah.
units.
And as far as choosing formats, I think that's something that should be up to a given table rather than something that we'd be covering here.
Yeah, that's so fair. That's so fair.
Um, Now, when it comes to the individual armies, we only have two armies that we have to worry about, and that's UNSC and Covenant.
Perfect. I
Um,
think I can manage that. I think we can manage that.
Now, this is where things get tricky, because obviously there are more Covenant units in the games compared to UNSC units, where the only UNSC units would be things like Marines, Marine Commanders, Sergeant Johnsons, ODSTs,
Mm-hmm.
and Spartans.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I had made my initial notes, the angle that I built around was even though there's less unit variety, um, each of the individual units for the UNSC are more versatile, whereas Covenant are more laser focused on particular roles.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially multi-role capable units um versus more dedicated ones. I'd say in that regard, the closest parallel I'd make with the Covenant is akin to maybe the Eldar, like how all units in
Okay.
Eldar are specialists in some
Mm-hmm.
form, but because of that specialization, they're not very flexible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very finesse army to kind
Hmm.
of line up the opportunities with the characters.
So, given that, when it comes to building an individual unit, uh, we'll start with the units and then we'll move on to like weapons. So I feel
Okay.
like that's how it should go. And as far as building, as far as the setup of the four roles, characters obviously would be cases like Master Chief, Sergeant Johnson, and the like.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So let me put that in. And obviously, with something like Master Chief, that would be a character variant of Spartans.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yes, you could almost even create the like Spartan profile first and like the abilities that you would want, and then just assign those same abilities to a character unit that just makes them a little bit stronger and a little
yeah.
bit more survivable.
Um, but the way that I'm looking at the tiers, I think I think school when it comes to there's not really a minion type meat shield when it comes to UNSC. One could argue the one could argue a UNSC Marine, but I feel like that's not quite it. Like they're
Mm,
not. When I'm thinking of minions, I'm thinking of the thing that you're going to be using tarpet strategies for. The slave casts of Skaven, or or like grunts of like the lowest kind of Tyranids.
hmm Would like Covenant grunts fit into that category?
Covenants would fit into minions. Uh,
Um,
and
yeah.
actually, when I look at, we'll get to that in a moment. But when I look at obviously, when it comes to the contraptions, all of the vehicles and like would fall into that category.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. That makes it pretty straightforward.
but so let me. I think the first thing is I think it'd be best to before we do any stats of any individual units, nail down what kind of units would be in the four tiers that you have the four tiers of unit that you have.
Mm-hmm.
I already mentioned Chief and Johnson for the UNSC. Um, I'd say For Covenant, probably both the Arbiter and the Brute Chieftain.
Mm-hmm. And probably you might even be able to group elites and hunters into that too.
What I was thinking is, just a squad of elites slash hunters. Those would be under squad.
Okay. Okay.
So in the same vein, um, I would say Spartans and ODST would be squad tier.
Mm-hmm. That
Uh,
makes sense.
Spartans, of course, being the heavy hitters, and ODST being the sneaky boys, since
Uh-huh.
ODST is an acronym for Orbital Drop Sharptroopers.
Yeah, I remember we talked about that a little bit. They carry like what, rapid fire stuff? Is that right?
They carry a suppressed SMG as their primary weapon.
Okay. So kind of like thinking like Astra Militarum Boyos that just came out recently that name are escaping me at a very awkward time.
Uh,
But yeah, okay. Yeah. I see where we're going.
mm-hmm. So minion in the case of the UNSC would be Marines. Characters would the role that I'm thinking of with this is that characters would be heroic variants of existing units. So
Mm-hmm.
Sergeant Johnson would be a heroic variant of a UNSC Marine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty much anybody you just want to assign like main character energy to or like
Mhm.
protagonist energy to.
And all vehicles and heavy guns. The mounted guns.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as the Covenant goes, and there's other potential characters. I'm just using these two as examples.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to Grunt, I said that's definitely a minion. I'd say
Yeah.
Jackal would probably be a squad because Jackals are a bit more specialized.
Yeah, I was thinking jackals, and from what little I know, skirmishers even could be a squad too, just because they, from my understanding, are relatively
Mm-hmm.
specialized.
So Jackals, Hunters definitely are
Yeah,
a
yeah,
squad
for
of
sure.
one probably, but still.
Yeah, squads are you need at least three for them before they fall into character, but we could kind of play around with that too. Of if you wanted to create kind of that main character energy around one of the hunters, and then have like a squad of hunters, you
Yeah.
could totally do that too.
Let's see, Brutes, which at the tail end of two ended up replacing the elites in terms of their position in the Covenant.
Hmm.
Oh, and of course, elites on their own would have to be squads, especially
Mm-hmm.
since early on they were meant to be the parallel to uh, Spartans. But in both cases, both sides only have one minion type. And when it comes to a parallel with how we'd have UNSC, as I mentioned, they don't have as many numbers, but each individual one is more versatile.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, when I'm thinking of a parallel, the closest thing I can think of is like Space Marines, or I was gonna say Imperial Guard, but Imperial Guard is a numbers game with just weak individual units, but very very strong vehicles.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of the one way or another. You're either chaff or you're the sledgehammer.
Mm-hmm. And not that I'd know a thing or two about it, because sorry, I can't hear you over the sound of a dozen basilisks.
Yeah, the drumming of cannons.
Uh, or I'd say, I think at one point I'd had it where I had basilisks that just had ridiculous range. So while the enemy is trying to get close, they're just getting carpet bombed. I'm like, y'all are talking some mad shit for some really fine looking grid coordinates.
Yeah, for real. To who it may concern, Basilisk Shell.
Mm-hmm. Since a lot of the aesthetic with the Imperial Guard is trying to call upon like World War One and two armies.
Yeah,
Um,
which is very flavorful. I do dig their vibe. It's just definitely not super specialized, at least as far as the infantry are concerned.
yeah. So because of that, I feel like there should be a rule that Covenant squads are going to be armed similarly, whereas that's not the case with UNSC.
Hmm. Yeah, that's fair. And you can kind of play around with that too, because like the when you're building your unit, you just kind of you can choose particular attacks with the kind of the weapons, but also you can just choose like abilities and attributes also. So if you wanted, one army to have more of a similar vibe in terms of what kit they're carrying, then you could assign fewer specialty weapons and just focus more on those attribute special rule changing characteristics. Whereas the other side, you can assign a lot of different cool weapon profiles in their characteristics, and that'll kind of reflect them being kitted differently.
Mm-hmm. So fortunately, each 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 individual unit has a certain baseline for the cost and skill points that can be played around with. Um, but just looking at the setup, um, so when it comes to how they'd be set out, characters would be done last, uh, for the purposes of this.
Okay.
But when it comes to the stat setup, um, so let's see, that would be um, movement, HP, accuracy, strength, resistance, agility, arcana, and vigor. Well, here's the
Yep.
obvious part we can get rid of. No unit is having arcana.
Easy dump stat right there. Yeah.
Uh, and
It,
though vigor that can stay because that's no different than like leadership uh in Warhammer.
right. It's often a dump stat when you're building units in pen, but you also have to retreat or roll to retreat after each attack, and you depend on vigor. So if you need a unit with staying power or that would be really brutish or fierce, you kind of need to invest
Mm.
into vigor, and it pays off because then you can slug them back with a counterattack.
Yeah. Uh, so obviously
And movement,
accuracy is ranged attacks, strength is melee attacks,
yep,
resistance is for blocking melee, agility is for dodging. Um,
yep. Resistance can be used for blocking um ranged attacks also. It's just resistance is kind of like well, it's based on kind of the pen RPG idea of like you can invest into resistance, which will let you soak most of the damage, but some might get through. Or you can invest in agility, which also serves as the unit's initiative, so they'll activate faster. And then it's kind of an all or nothing where either they take all the damage or they dodge all the damage. And in order to dodge, they have to be able to move at least an inch so
yeah,
they can get kind of cornered. So agility can be good, but it is kind of also an all or nothing.
yeah. Now, as as I recall, squads have 5 points. Uh,
Let's
to
have 5 points. Yep.
have 5 points, and let me see what their base move. Actually, you didn't put in a for whatever reason, I was thinking there was a base movement.
Oh, the base movement's 3 inches for everybody.
All right. So, and
It
looking
should
at
be in here. I
the
don't see it.
when I did my out, I do think that there's one stat that would have to be house ruled because it's such an integral part in the games, and that's shields. So it's a question of, because shields are basically a temp HP that can recharge.
Mm.
The way characters with shields usually work is when they take damage until their shields break, and then it goes straight to their HP. If they spend a bit of time not getting shot at, then they can move it to, then they can recharge those shields.
What you could do for that is, if we put like a point or two into each character that would have a shield, and then there's an ability that lets you regenerate health at the start of each turn, then that would kind of mimic that effect of, you start off with extra health and then you might lose it, but then you gain it back as though the shield was recharging.
Which is tempting, but I'm kind of iffy about mixing HP into that. A counter offer I'd say would be would be a certain number of automatic resistance saves.
That could work.
Uh,
Like, just they're guaranteed to well, there is too, kind of how armor works, where with armor and heavy armor you just suffer either 1 fewer damage or 2 fewer damage from each attack that hits you. Although it does, I mean, it still allows a minimum of 1 through, so maybe that wouldn't quite fit either.
No,
but
this isn't like Doom where armor just trades off some of the damage to health. Or when I say that, I'm specifically referring to like OG Doom, not 2016 or Eternal. The other reason that I'd want to go that route is one of the power ups that you can get is over shields, which just adds another layer to said shield.
Do the shields have a mechanically unique impact besides effectively just adding HP? Like, do they?
They again they recharge up to full, but HP doesn't. So if you were, oh, go ahead.
Can you think of it as like the net? Because like the HP wouldn't come back, but effectively you're making it so that person can take 10, like say 10 shots when their shield is functioning, and then if you hit through their shield, then you start doing damage to them. But the shield plus their HP still, amounts to a total of 10, I guess. But then if they ended up healing more than the shield could be credited for, that could be an issue.
That's why I was thinking of simplifying it as a limited auto block.
Yeah. No, that works. I mean, you could just assign, especially because it is going to be kind of homebrewed against 2 armies that are going to be playing the same vibe. I mean, you could just have it set that each side gets a certain number of shield dice that they can assign to their units as though they were, affected by these shields.
Only particular units would have it. Like grunts, marines, and they're not going to have shields. That would be specific to things like Spartans or elites.
So you could just make it so that for each character or squad over 120 points or something, then they get a certain number of shields.
Yeah. So let's see, I did have so given that, remind me so you said base movement is 3 inches.
Yep.
And I had. And what was base HP like for squads?
Squads is 1 HP per model.
So a squad of Spartans would be about 4. So they would have 4 HP each.
4 HP total.
Okay.
So each time one died, you take a model away. But you can increase their HP using different characteristics as well. So they might be able to lose, 1 or 2 before you actually lose a model from the unit.
Yeah, when I was doing a D10 based design, I had it that they had 10 health.
I just found it got a little tricky from a design perspective or from a gameplay perspective of assigning individual damage, because then you have to get into damage allocation, and each model becomes their own. You have their own range from the other attacking models and unique cover for each model, and it got to be a little bit more of a Warhammery network than I was hoping to for kind of the entry level gamers. You definitely do trade off some of that realism though too. So I mean, if you wanted to homebrew something like that for it, I could definitely see it. But I think there are some characteristics that would still be able to buff them up enough to make them a little more resilient.
I do think that because this is more of a skirmish level, that that individual HP should be a consideration, since you're dealing with smaller units.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if this was going full army, that'd be a different story.
Mm-hmm. You could even do too. I mean, if you want a squad of 4, like Spartans, you could even just do 2 or 3 characters instead, and because then each one would have a base HP of 5, and they would be a little bit more resilient, and you could still flavor them as the squad, but they'd be acting more independently then.
And I had checked the baseline of health was 10. The Spartan baseline health was 15.
Okay.
In the initial notes, and this was when I was operating around building a 2d10 based system. The approach that I had at the time was you're rolling 2d10, keeping the highest, and contrasting that with a armor rating. The difference determining how much damage you do. That was the concept I had at the time.
And that would, I mean, this is designed to be a little bit of a light, fast system, so it'll probably be more fatal still than that. But also, the base damage for weapons is 1, unless you take characteristics to buff it. So if you buff their HP even a little bit with some characteristics, they'd still be decently resilient, just because each shot that was coming at them would still only be 1, versus with the D10, 2d10 dropping the highest, I imagine, or lowest. I imagine you could dish out a fair amount more damage.
But when it comes to the roll to hit, you had it that you're rolling d6s to determine damage.
Yep, to determine hits. So you'll roll, depending on the weapon profile. With the base weapon profile, you roll a d6 for each model in the unit, and then you add their accuracy if it's a shot, or strength if it's a melee. And if the total for each is 7 or higher, then that dice translates into a hit. And if it totals 12 or higher, then that dice translates into 2 hits.
Yeah. For the purposes of this, just using the actually, instead of using I was using the Spartan baseline, but I think before I even get to that, it'd be better to go with the Marine baseline. So, since that would be a minion, let's see, minions start. They cost 5 points each and have 3 skill points.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I would say, given that, the HP thing is already taken into account because they have one.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
remind me, are you using like that 2-inch rule when it comes to a unit, i.e. they roll it's a unit if it's 2 inches within another unit.
They have to have base-to-base contacts for unit coherence and to be in combat range.
All right. Given the 3 points that they'd have, since most of the standard loadout for the Marine is the battle rifle with some variations, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
I'd say they'd be putting most of their stuff into accuracy.
Yeah, I think that'd be probably smart. Maybe even, I don't know, you could do 2 into accuracy and 1 into agility if you wanted them to try and act before some of the bigger bads that might take him out, or you could even just sink all 3 into accuracy and they'd be a decent gun line in the back, or meat shield in the front. Either way.
They're a lot of times when they're seen, they're doing gun lines and trying to not get into close as physically possible. So just putting all 3 points into accuracy would be the best approach. And I had made a, and when it comes to Spartans, they are the all around that are able to get in close, able to be in range, but they just don't have as many units.
Mm-hmm.
Squad. You mentioned squads also having a max of 1 HP.
Yep.
And having a movement of 3 inches.
Yep.
And let's see, as far as the skill points, they have 5. And,
yes, you got a little bit more to work with there.
And I would say they'd be a bit more spread out. Like one in vigor, 1 in accuracy, 1 in strength, and 1 in. I mean, I would have liked to have done one in each, but that's a little bit over.
Yeah, with squads, you kind of still have to choose like a primary and a secondary thing that you want to focus on. Minions are kind of one-hit wonders. They do kind of one thing. And then squads, you can kind of pick one that they'll be good at and one that they'll be okay at. But if you spread it too thin, then they end up pretty bad at everything. Yeah. So if you want kind of an all-around, characters are kind of the best with the 10 skill points. Yeah. But you could still do like agility, strength, and accuracy, and then they'd be relatively hard to hit, and still relatively combat oriented. Maybe.
I do think because of the fact that they are faster than normal humans, movement should go up to 4 instead of 3.
That's a good call. Yeah.
And ODSTs are going to be in a similar vein as Marines. The big thing is that they are meant to be more sneaky.
Okay.
Uh,
And that's something too we could do, show more in characteristics too, or if we wanted to create like an identical stat line,
mm-hmm.
then we could still give them some of those sneak abilities. There's even like a from above ability that simulates dropping in, kind of like a Helldiver style.
Or Deep Strike.
Yeah, yep, there are different deep strike options too, whether it's underground, above ground, or being like redeployed.
Mm-hmm. And when I look at the characteristics, for Marines one of the characteristics I gave initially was squad tactics. Basically, they're better at shooting attacks when they're shooting as groups as opposed to on their own.
Oh yeah. We've got a similar one, Crossfire, where you gain +1 accuracy if the unit that you're shooting at was shot at by another friendly unit on your last turn.
Mm-hmm. So, I'd say they'd all have Crossfire.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And that'll add 10 points each per unit.
I'd say, and that's the main one that I gave to Marines. When it comes to ODSTs, I did have Orbital Drop as one of their passives. The other was flanking.
Okay.
Basically, they're better at as long as they're not in line of sight, they're better at shooting.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
Because the thing of, again, their primary weapon is a silenced SMG. The ODSTs are meant to be dropped behind enemy lines to either sabotage, assassinate, basically pulling special ops.
Mm-hmm. We've got a couple things that could simulate that. We have from above, which is you don't deploy them on the board on the first turn, and instead the first time you would activate them, you get to drop them on the battlefield anywhere they would fit, and they get +2 strength until the end of their turn. So it kind of simulates a shock attack.
Mm-hmm.
We do have flank, which lets them perform an additional melee attack on a turn if the enemy is adjacent to another friendly enemy that's identical to this one.
Would there
So if
be
you
a
had like
would there be a ranged equivalent of flank?
Crossfire would probably be the closest. We do have there's like sniper and stuff which give them extra attacks. There's like camouflage which gives them they can't be targeted unless they're the closest unit to the enemy. So that would give them some of that survivability camouflage you were talking about.
I'd say camouflage would be the better case in this instance.
Let's see if I can find that one.
I found it on page 14.
Yup. Yeah, it can't be attacked by ranged enemies unless it's the closest enemy to the attacker.
So, and that's 25. That's an additional 25 points. Then, of course, when it comes to Spartans, the main thing I gave as a passive was man portable, so they could carry heavy weapons without needing them to be emplaced. I.e., they could take a mounted gun and just carry it around and use it like a regular heavy gun.
Okay, so they had kind of like a heavy shot attack.
In some of the firefights, what you could, if there was like a mounted machine gun, you could take it off the mount and still use it. You just would be moving slowly.
Okay. Well, there is artillery barrage, which would kind of simulate that. Because there aren't like heavy weapons, assault weapons type deal in this. That's not like a directly equivalent mechanic, but it would give the squad of Marines or of Spartans a extra 46 or a 4-shot attack that did 2 damage each. And so it would kind of simulate them carrying around like a heavy turret gun like that.
Mm-hmm. So that cost them 25 points.
And I might even be able to find a cheaper one. I was thinking there was like a machine gun equivalent that did like 5 shots and 1 damage each, but I'll keep an eye out for that.
I do think I do think Spartans should have disciplined.
Yeah, that'd be a good one. Which, just for the folks at home, that's an extra skill point, so they just get better than everybody else.
Yeah, and
or 2 extra skill.
Yeah, and that would be used to put resistance and vigor at 1 each. So they pretty much got 1s across the board.
Oh, they start with 1s across the board, so they should have probably 2s then.
All right, I can go with that. So given that, I think that covers the main non-character units. Then we get into Master Chief and Sergeant Johnson.
Woo! All right, this is the fun stuff. I love designing characters.
With Master Chief, that's the same. We can. So how many? Remind me, how many base movements, HP, and skill points would you be dealing with for character tier?
Characters start with 5 health. They still have the base 3 movement, and everything. All the other skills start at base 1. But they get 10 skill points to put in, so a lot more flexibility.
All right. And given that, I do think 1 point has to go into movement. Let's see. 1 more in accuracy, 1 in strength, 1 in agility, 1 in resistance. So that's 5. Let's see, 1 in vigor. So it is going into 2s, and it is good. I think it should take artillery barrage and disciplined as well. So let's see, 1, 2, 6. You said 10 points?
Yep, 10 points.
I think 1 more in accuracy to bring that up to 3. 1 more in agility. 1 more in vigor. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Probably bring up HP to 6. And then there's the 2 extra points. We'll put those in accuracy and strength. So with Master Chief, it's movement 4, HP 6, accuracy 3, strength 4, resistance 2, agility 3, and vigor 3.
That's a pretty solid spread. I mean, that means that there'll be sluggers in melee, decent shots. We might add, because they're a smaller lineup, give them they do already have artillery barrage, which gives them a fair number of shots. So yeah, that seems pretty good. Did you say agility 3?
Yeah.
Okay. So there'll be what's that, like a 50-50 chance whether they survive if a given shot gets to them.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be a little bit dangerous, but if you're just doing a skirmish size battle that, it's only going to be a half hour, 45-minute game, that's probably fine.
Yeah. Um. So when it so then there's Sergeant Johnson. Who I did give a he would have this he has the same passive as the UNSC Marine, which can be shown as Crossfire. But
Mm-hmm.
let's see. You said
Then he might benefit from command, where when he activates, he gets to choose a friendly unit that gets a buff that round.
um yeah, definitely since he is a frontline kind of sergeant. So that's 20 points. Um, which fits with one of the I had originally when I wrote my notes, I had it that Marines within 2 inches of him use both dice instead of one dice when making shooting attacks, but that's more or less handled by command.
Ooh, there is something we can do with that though. It might be reserved for mechanical units though, but there is something where you can like so lookouts maybe. Oh yeah, lookout is friendly squad units within 10 inches may re-roll accuracy rolls of 1 and replace 1 with the new result. So only Spartans would benefit from both of those,
Uh,
but it would
mhm.
get them pretty jacked.
Yeah, I'd say oh, and that's another 20. Um, so because of this, both Chief and Johnson have the same modifiers as modifier total in terms of point cost. Um, though I did write in that shields should be a special rule, and in this case, that is going to Spartans and Chief. They would have shield 1.
Okay, fair. So we could create a point value for that, or we could just give the Covenant the same ability and call it even.
Elites would have a similar thing. So both elites and the arbiter would have that, and in this case, Spartans and Master Chief would have it.
Sweet.
Uh, so both of them would have shield 1.
And that was just one automatic save on incoming attacks
Yeah.
per turn.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then they get that dice back at the start of their next turn.
Yes. If I have
Okay.
to if I have to add an extra rule, you could have it that they get it back as long as as long as they spent the full round not getting hit. But that might be too much of a cost.
Yeah. It'd be a little bit more to keep track. Well, I guess it wouldn't be that much more to keep track of. It's just if your guy didn't get hit last turn. But either way, I think it works pretty well.
Mm-hmm. And hang on a minute. I realize I'm writing all of this off screen, but I don't have I can't set it up where I have it um on both
Uh-oh.
because I'm writing this on a notepad. Um,
Oh.
so it's not going to look all that good if if I just screen share a notepad image. It would be kind of blinding. For the same reason, if you're playing a long form strategy game, you're not going to see a whole lot of excessively bright colors.
I do love me the good old pen and paper though. I have a notebook that I still write all of the first draft of my game ideas in because for whatever reason, putting pen to paper, it just feels so much more creative.
Yeah.
I love it.
I mostly use Notepad and the like because I don't want people to make the joke about me having doctor handwriting or something.
Oh. Uh-oh.
Uh,
My notebook handwriting is all like that too, because I know I'm the only one who's going to be reading it, so it's... And I even just go by shape sometimes more than by spelling.
mm-hmm.
If I know the first letter and the last letter and it's shaped generally correctly, then I just kind of call it.
So on the Covenant end of things, the first one that have to be done is the Grunt.
That one's going to be a minion, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Grunts tend to be, despite their size, they now I only had that at 3 health, but because of their small size, I think they dump everything into agility.
Okay. So they're just little Griblies that go and die?
Well, about that, there were 3 passives that I gave. One of them is methane life support. The reason they have the kind of equipment is that where they're normally from has a methane-based environment, so they need special life support. The approach I had is that if an attack targeting them rolls a match, they're instantly KO'd.
Oh wow. Yeah, so that would check to give them all agility then, because then it's like unless they roll to save, they're just.
Mm-hmm. The other thing is, I had it then when reduced to 0 health, they can make an attack as if throwing a plasma grenade where they died. This is to replicate the whole tactic that they will sometimes do of grab 2 plasma grenades and just charge at you. Just do a suicide run.
Yeah, so we could give them explosion. I think is that what it's called? Explosion. Yeah, when this unit dies, all units within 6 inches suffer 1 damage. Or we could even give them spectacular explosion, or when they die, all units within 10 inches suffer 2 damage. And they can spend an action to destroy themselves.
Yeah. I think explosion is enough. That's 6 inches. Spectacular, that's way too much. That 10 inches is a bit much for
Yeah.
For essentially 2 grenades.
That'd be most of our skirmish battlefield, probably.
Mm-hmm. And I'd use spectacular explosion for like load-bearing villains, if you catch my drift.
Yeah, and I'm seeing now too that they actually have to be a machine to have spectacular explosion anyway. So we could give them cyborg to do it, but probably not points.
No, and when it comes to the types thing, I'm not losing sleep on that because I know why it's there. It just doesn't fit this. When
Yeah,
you're
that's
going to be
fair.
dealing with humanoids or different types of aliens.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
So movement 3 inches, HP is 1. All the more reason to have Marines focus on doing firing lines.
Mm-hmm.
So,
ooh, there was one other idea that I had for Marines. Feel free to shoot it down. But let's see. Where's it? It's where when the unit activates, then anybody that's adjacent to them, if they're the same, like identical unit, then they get to activate all together. So if you had like 3 units of Marines side by side, then instead of shooting them over the course of 3 turns, you could just make one big volley all together.
That actually would be closer to the mark.
Oh, okay.
Which characteristic did you say that was?
I'm trying to find the name of it. We might have to keep going, and then when I see it, I'll flag you down.
So, let's see. That covers the grunt. So, as far as the first of the squad ones, that would be the jackal. Jackals tend to lean towards precision weaponry, including the infamous Jackal snipers that have traumatized a whole generation because of their experience with Halo 2,
Oh no.
where they, if you were playing Halo 2 on Legendary, a sniper shot was a one-hit KO, and Jackals not only because of the fact you're playing on Legendary, everyone fires faster than you, has more health, and Jackals could blend into the environment because of their silhouette. This is why in 3 they were given glowing helmets so that they were easier to spot because they were such a nightmare.
Oh no.
To the point where you're just walking across an area and then shot.
Yeah, that sounds really frustrating.
Mm-mm.
Not gonna lie. So, but there are a lot of cool characteristics we could do for that. I mean, there's sniper, there's assassin, which would give them extra points for targeting characters.
I'd say anything that gives them an extended range for their ranged attacks.
Yeah, there's let's see, where's the thinking of it? One that gives them like a special ranged attack. In pen, everything has pretty much unlimited range. Like any ranged weapon has unlimited range. So as long as they had a line of sight, they could shoot clean across the battlefield already. But we could give them a sniper ability or a heavy sniper ability where they get an alternative attack that does extra damage. It does 2 damage, and rolls to block it suffer -2 resistance and -2 agility.
Yeah, I would say. Let me see if I can find that. Cause I think down the. Oh, what page?
I think it's on 20.
Oh, I found it.
I'm realizing I'm using an older draft of the book because it's got all of my markups and edits on the prototype, so my page numbers might not line up quite with yours.
Yeah, I would say sniper would definitely fit for Jackals. And in that same vein, I would have. Let's see. So, I think you said squads have 5 points, right?
Yep.
I think it'd be 3 and 2 in accuracy and agility, and that's it.
That seems fair.
Because I think in that same vein, squads don't start at all ones. It sounded like.
Yeah, they do start all at 1, but then as soon as you start putting stuff into them, then they go up. So every unit starts with 1 in all of their skills except for in movement, which has 3, and then only characters they get the extra health to 5.
All right. Then I need to make some adjustments because for whatever reason I was thinking that it started at 0. So.
Oh yeah, no, I did start off with that in the early drafts of the game, but then I realized that you end up with a bunch of really weak units that don't do a whole lot. So I had to give them a good baseline.
Yeah. So it's not a deal breaker. I just had to make some adjustments.
And the ability we were looking at for the Marines is called a host. It's on page 18. And it's if this unit's adjacent to 1 or more identical units, those units up to 25 models may all activate together on the same turn as though they were 1 unit.
So. All right. And the 25 model cap isn't going to matter for the purposes of this because we're going skirmish tier.
Right. It'd just be to prevent, a 1,500 point army from all activating at once.
Yes, the orc strategy of combat.
Exactly. Yeah, I wanted to create the option, but didn't want to make it game.
Yeah. So. Some of the numbers might be off, but I can deal with that later. So that covers Jackal. Then it comes to Hunters. Hunters are big guys with their own specialized heavy weapons. That the big gimmick with them is that they are very resistant unless you shoot them in the back.
Okay. So we could give them like rotate shields, which lets them choose a unit at the start of their turn, and they get +3 resistance from ranged attacks against that unit until this unit's next activation. They get to like orient themselves basically against one person and be super tough, and then weak against everyone else, or weaker.
Which ability was that?
That's rotate shields.
Okay, let me.
It is, let's see, page 23.
All right. It's 20 points. Spend an action. Yeah, it would just be that they can that. I would just put a side note saying special rule. They can only target themselves with it.
Well, they benefit from the +3 resistance themselves, but they choose one enemy unit to get the +3 resistance against. So, like, they could choose a squad of like Spartans, and if those Spartans attack them, then they get an extra 3 resistance against it.
All right, that would make sense then. So I would. Beyond that, since they have their own weapon that's exclusive to them, as I mentioned, the fuel rod cannon.
Okay.
I would
sounds like a. Oh, go ahead.
I would say that it'd be tempting to give them artillery barrage. I'd actually say, probably artillery bombard.
Okay. A little extra damage, fewer attack.
And that is 20 points. So they're an expensive squad. But again, you don't see hunters all that much.
What do they clock in as point wise?
Base +40 so far. I haven't put in their. I feel like they're definitely putting at least 2 points in resistance. And one in strength, and I'd say 1 in HP. Wait, never mind, not HP. They can't do. They're locked at 1 point. Sorry.
No worries.
In that sense, I'd say 1 in vigor. They're not going to be dodging, but they're going to be blocking a hell of a lot, which makes them annoying to take down. I did give them a charge action.
Okay. So is that like extra damage if they charge, or like an extra attack if they charge?
It had it that they'd move in one direction, make a close quarters attack. That would use the sum of both dice in that system I was making notes with.
Okay, there is one. Let's see. There is a roughly equivalent one here. Oh yeah, is it rapid? No, not rapid charge. Focus mods, vicious mods, transform, onslaught. Oh, whoops. I missed it. Ramming. If this unit completes a movement action that uses its full movement and ends adjacent to an enemy, this unit gains a bonus melee 4 attacks, or 4d6 attack.
So ramming, and that's 15 points.
Yup.
Not too long ago, somebody made a mod to Combat Evolved called Cursed Halo that had a specialized grenade called the D20 grenade, which you throw the thing and something random happens. Sometimes you get flashbang. Sometimes it generates trees in the environment. Sometimes it generates a random vehicle. Sometimes it generates a bunch of enemies that you probably shouldn't be going with. Sometimes it generates a random power-up, and in one case it generated like 8 hunters.
Oh, jeez. That sounds like the deck of many things.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, when it comes to brutes, they're not as tough as hunters, but they are meant to be pretty tough. The big thing about them is that they're much better at they're very good at close quarters, and the big passive I gave them was being able to do a movement that ignores terrain, since they're not doing jumping attacks.
Yeah, Leap would be perfect for that. That lets them once per turn ignore the effect of terrain. Leap. Yeah, it's only 5 points. Once per activation, this unit may pass through a piece of barrier terrain without taking a movement penalty.
And once again, I'd say they're going to be similar to hunters in the fact that they'd be putting a lot of it in resistance and strength. Because you look at brute weapons, they're not exactly subtle.
Fair enough.
Though I would say they'd have one more in accuracy than hunters, since they have some degree of all around, but there's definitely a bit of a leaning towards physical. And I'd say both leap and ramming would probably be in their wheelhouse.
You could even give them like rapid charge, which if they move twice on their turn, then they get to move an extra 2 inches. So they'd have to spend one action to do the second movement, but if it was important for them to be like all over the map, that might be a really cool way to do it.
I don't think they're going to be that fast, but it's a good suggestion.
Okay. Yeah, totally fair.
So as I mentioned before, since the next one on the list is elites. Elites definitely have shields, as mentioned before, so they'd have shield 1.
Would they also would they have extra toughness on top of that? Because we could give them armor too, if that was fitting.
The armor's not as important as the shield, so I'd say they'd have a similar spread to Spartans. Again, drawing those parallels.
Mm-hmm.
I did give him the passive of grunts within 3 inches use both dice when making shooting attacks. So I'd say they would have command.
There is two. I'm trying to find it. There's one that lets targeting protocols. Whenever a machine it's a machine squad. But if you didn't mind as much about the unit types, within 4 inches of this unit performs an accuracy roll, they can re-roll the initial roll if it's a failure.
Which one was that?
That's targeting protocols.
So let me see one.
That does only benefit squads, though, so the grunts might not. Command might be better if we wanted it on the grunts.
Yeah, because the big thing is that they're usually barking orders at grunts.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would probably make more sense than his command.
And since one of the signature things with elites is the energy sword, I think that'd be best represented with something like flurry.
Oh yeah, flurry could be good. Or there's let's see, you could give him a relic weapon. Giant weapon. Yeah, that would give him like an alternative 5 attack melee weapon shooting.
Yeah, I could more likely see that.
Do the 20-point version or the 25, or even just.
What page is that on?
That's on. Look in my updated one. That is page 17. The bottom of 17. There's a giant weapon, a giant artifact weapon, and a giant relic weapon.
Yeah, giant weapon relic would fit.
Perfect.
And that is 20 points. And when it comes to the weapons, would those be handled in the form of individual characteristics or something else?
Those are characteristics. Yep. So, yeah, these characteristics that we're choosing are covering both their equipment, their like attributes and abilities, and their weapons.
Mm-hmm. So I think regarding that, it'd be better to go with the kind of recommended characteristic for individual weapons. Just so there's difference between someone using a shotgun versus someone using a BR. With a few special rules, because let's be honest, every army and every war game has special rules.
It's true.
But is what
hopefully this gives a good
hope. I think instead it'd be better to look at vehicles, and I can give kind of an equivalence. You can tell me what would be analogous. So the first one I have is the Scorpion, which is a big old tank.
Okay.
A tank with a big old smoothbore cannon.
Okay, let's see. So for vehicles, we build them as a contraption, so they are basically the same as a character, where they have ones across the board, except for 3 movement and 5 health. And then if you were keeping track of the unit types, they would automatically be a machine unit. Otherwise, though, they are effectively the same. So for a big old tank, I mean, you could dump stuff in resistance and accuracy, and that would give them solid survivability. and firepower. For the actual firepower themselves, there are a couple good options there. The artillery is good for that. Like if they just have a single shot, you could give them the artillery missile, which I mean it wouldn't literally be a missile in this case; it'd be a cannon round, but it's a one shot that could do 6 damage. So kind of an all or nothing slugger. There's obliterate, which would let them attack even like terrain items or objects and destroy the terrain around the board, which could be pretty good. There's the armor could be good for them, just for extra survivability. Oh, Dre might be a good ability. That would be page.
For the Scorpion, no, but for the Warthog, yes.
Okay.
Speaking of which, the Warthog. I know you've seen a Warthog before.
Yes, that I am familiar with.
Now, Warthogs are the big thing that they're known for is being speedy and being able to hold a bunch of people. They tend to have one. The big thing is that a bunch of variants. They could either be outfitted with a chain gun, with a Gauss cannon, with a grenade launcher, with a rocket launcher, or with nothing, but be able to carry more people in them. But the most common form of them is a jumped up Jeep with a chain gun in the back.
So for that, there's a particular ability I'm trying to think of. It gives like a ton of extra shots. See, what is that one? It lets you do like 5 shots as like a bonus attack. You'd think I'd have all these memorized now, but there's more of them than I always realize. Through crossfire, curse, deflect, yeah, I might have to grab. We can keep going, but I'm gonna grab another book that I've got here with some notes in that I know I've been pre-building units of my own.
Yeah, I do think that Dre is a must because of how fast they are.
Yeah, and a little extra resistance never hurts.
But those were the 2 main vehicles I covered. When it came to the Covenant end of vehicles, there were slightly more, and by slightly I mean 3 vehicles. 4 vehicles instead of 2. There's
that's just way too many.
Yeah. I was tempted to add the Pelican to the UNSC list, but the Pelican's too big. And ultimately it's a flying troop transport. It is the equivalent of a Valkyrie.
Oh yeah. That's pretty solid, pretty hefty.
Or a flying Rhino.
I miss rhinos. All of these floating tanks, man.
Yeah.
Putting my old boys out of work.
Like, you can't have a flying Rhino. I can with a strong enough dreadnought.
Or a knight that just cleans them across the battlefield.
Yep. But Banshees are similar to Warthogs in terms of being the fast attacker as far as vehicles go. The big thing is that there is the whole flying thing, and you only fire right in front of it.
Okay. So we could give it like we could give it flying for one thing. And then there's like some flamer abilities, which might replicate some of the plasma weapons of the Covenant, and those have a limited range. There's like Immolation, which gives you a 4-shot attack that automatically hits. All 4 attacks automatically hit all units within a 5-inch straight line from this model. Or there's Flamethrower, which gives a little bit bigger. It's 10 inches, and it does D6 shots that automatically hit a single target.
Yeah. I'd say between those Flamethrower.
Or there's Heavy Flamethrower, which does 2 damage instead of the 1, but still D6 shots.
It's not that the attack isn't that strong, I think. But you have a similar thing with the chopper. So there's not a whole lot of. The only difference with the chopper is that they don't have flying. But they would have a flamethrower.
And you can give them hover too, which hover lets them ignore terrain,
Hover
but it doesn't
might be a
give
better
them
fit
the...
than flying. For the Banshee. Now the ghosts and specters, those ones would, especially the ghosts, that would have flying.
Okay.
But what was that ability you mentioned about an extra bit of movement that you had thought about giving to the brute? Ghosts would actually benefit from that since they do have a boost option.
Oh, that's a rapid charge. If they move twice, then they get an extra 2 inches of movement. It's on page 22.
Yeah, that would fit ghosts. And with wraiths.
Oh,
good.
Here's the ability I was looking for the Warthog. Rapid Fire Burst. Its standard shot becomes 6 shots instead of the 1 it would have normally.
I could definitely see that. And when it comes to the Wraith, it's pretty much a plasma tank, so it would pretty much have the same features as the Scorpion, because there's going to be a lot of parallel setups when it comes to units.
Okay.
But the big dividing line between UNSC and Covenant weapons was, one is projectile, the other is hit scan, but the bigger thing is, instead of strictly relying on ammo, plasma weapons had to manage heat, and I'm curious how that could be emulated.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, you could do a cooldown mechanic of something like like with, if they were using flamethrower, you roll each turn that you use it, you like roll 2d6 and use the lower option, or you do d6 minus 1, where the minus is the number of turns that you've used it, so like -3 on your 3rd turn or something like that, unless you don't use that weapon on your turn. There isn't anything like that baked in, but you can house rule it.
The approach I'm thinking is akin to like weapon jams in Space Hulk. Know your weapon jams if you roll Snake Eyes.
Yeah, you could do that with the flamethrower, where if they roll a 1 on their d6 shots, or you could do it kind of like a plasma weapon in 40k, where if you roll a 6, then you can't use it on your next turn.
That'd be a case of special rule, which would be given to any covenant. And it's just a 1-turn penalty if you roll a 1. So the approach of plasma weapons are powerful, but if the dice gods are not on your side, which I realize is a redundant statement because the dice gods hate everyone.
All feel their wrath.
But to play devil's advocate on that, the dice gods hate everyone equally.
True. Well, sometimes it doesn't feel like that. But yeah, in the grand scheme of things, we know it's true.
You can just expect that they are just looking for the right moment to screw you over. If they haven't done it yet, it just hasn't happened yet. And if
we serve a greater God.
Yeah. If they seem nice to somebody, that's just the setup.
They really are the OG chaos gods.
Yeah. I ended up when I was talking about my problem with the Vancian model yesterday with Ronwise, I ended up bringing up the way magic works in Warhammer or psychic works in 40k, because a big problem I've had with the Vancian model that like D&D uses is there's no given reason for why magic has to work that way.
Yeah.
Some of that's due to the whole not nailing down whether or not you have a setting or not. But if somebody asked me why you have to roll for things like Perils of the Warp in Warhammer 40k and fantasy, I would say because messing around with magic, even in the most minor of senses, is really fucking dangerous.
Yeah, that's facts.
I think Pancreas had described it as handling nuclear material. And if you're dealing with Warpstone, you pretty much are handling nuclear material.
I've been reading the Eisenhorn books these last few weeks, and seeing like everyday people use psychic power or like normal astropaths like just dying at young ages. It's like, dang, this is messed up stuff.
Yeah. The Eisenhorn books are an interesting beast because it's kind of taking 40k and going detective fiction with it. Yeah,
I'm really enjoying it so far. It's a little different. But
I will admit my favorite Warhammer books are the Gotrek and Felix books in fantasy.
Okay, I remember you mentioning those at one point. I'm gonna have to go back and circle to them.
Gotrek and Felix are the adventures of the odd couple in 40k sense, because Gotrek is a slayer. I think you're familiar with how dwarven slayers work in fantasy.
Yep.
It's just he's the worst slayer because he is really, really shit at the whole dying thing. He picks an opponent who he thinks is going to give him a glorious death. That thing fucking dies because Gotrek Gurnison is a human meat grinder. And then he ends up grumbling and getting drunk again because he was denied what he wanted.
And so the cycle continues.
Yeah, and Felix is stuck following him as his rememberer, i.e., somebody to tell the tale of his glorious death. But because even though they've gone through stuff that in any other campaign would have them be legendary heroes, they live like they're still first level characters because, Gotrek is a slayer. He doesn't care about material wealth, and Felix technically killed a member of guard during it and started a food riot. So
Oh no.
he's a wanted man. But you know, and as far as 40K, if someone asks me my favorite book series in that, it's Caiaphas Cain, the hero of the Imperium, who may or
I've
may
heard
not
good things.
who may or may not be a massive coward. They play loose with it about whether or not he's actually a coward or if he just has imposter syndrome.
Honestly, in 40K, it seems like the only way you survive is by being a coward. Maybe that's a scandalous take. I don't know. I'm sure the Emperor wouldn't appreciate that, but too many heroes die, man. Too many of everybody dies.
It's either cowardice or just insanity.
Yeah.
Although in his case, it all started because of the kind of misunderstanding that I could only expect in British humor. He joined a second line unit thinking they're going to be second line, so I'm not going to have to get directly in the fighting. The fighting ends up coming to them with a Tyranid incursion. He ends up making a break for it, and in the process of making a break for it, finds the secondary force the Tyranids were using. So now everyone thinks that he heroically charged to mark the target of the secondary attack.
Dang, what a man. What a poor man.
And because of that, he can't just say, no, I was trying to run away, because that'd get him shot, and he likes living.
Right.
I'm vastly summarizing, but point stands. I will admit the main thing I would have to house rule a whole system around is involving the weapons, because part of the fantasy with the video games is picking up any weapon that you happen to come across. And because of that, having those sort of pickups and the like is something that would have to be carried in if somebody's going to be doing a Halo skirmish kind of game. And this applies just as much to things like equipment or power-ups. A lot of the equipment that was in Halo 3 isn't all that noteworthy. The one that is noteworthy was the bubble shield, which just would block ranged attacks for a bit of time, but you could still go right through it and do melee if you wanted to. Because it calls itself the bubble shield, and it is exactly what it sounds like on the tin.
What you could do is just have it that they gain, if you you'd have it so that they drop a token or something, even if you just use a penny when they die, and then if you cross over or spend an action to pick it up, then you gain whatever the ability they had that gave them the bonus attack. I feel like that'd be a pretty easy house rule system for something like that.
I could definitely see it. And when it comes... Also, I see that Balanced Hydra in the chat said, or both, cowards and insanity are not exclusive. That is true. That is true. Look at the Death... I wasn't going to say look at the Death Guard, but look at the Thousand Suns, and look at Magnus the Red.
Oh, rip. The Thousand Suns did nothing wrong. I said what I said.
Actually, let me make it a bit more specific. Instead of the Thousand Suns as a whole, Ahriman.
Yeah.
Ahriman is a cartoon villain.
I feel for him, though. He and his poor brother served the Imperium loyally, and they got nothing for it.
On the other hand, I will bully Magnus the whole time, because he was specifically told, knock it off with this excessively using chaos shit, and then gets dragged into a public trial, gets chastised by everybody, and still does it. But if I want to go with the king when it comes to this, it's Erebus.
Oh, okay. But with Magnus, you have to admit, the Emperor did not tell him why he couldn't use it, or even that it was chaos at first. I think the
Yeah.
poor man was given a gift by his father and then tried to use it and was like slapped in front of everybody.
Yeah. Though when it comes to Erebus, there is no defending him.
That one I'm not as familiar with, so I'll probably comfortably give that to you.
Erebus
With 40k, there's
is
usually no defending.
Erebus is one of the even among the assholes, Erebus is king asshole.
Oh jeez.
As well, the first mark against him, he was Lorgar's right hand man, and the guy who kind of set things in motion to cause Lorgar to fall to chaos as it was. That and his more infamous moments is getting his ass completely owned by Karn the Betrayer.
Yikes.
To the point where everybody watching was laughing at him. And
Oh no.
the only reason he survived that fight was because he teleported out at the last minute.
Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do.
The whole thing is because as a means to try and push things towards chaos, Erebus murdered the one good friend that Karn had in the World Eaters.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's weird. I'm sad.
And well, you made the 500 IQ move to piss off the people who are naturally pissed off.
Yeah, that's no bueno.
So, of course, Lorgar told him about who killed Argo Tall in that case. I think because he knew it was a unnecessary move, so he wanted to teach Erebus a lesson. Although if I had to go with people who have definitely done everything wrong, I could always bring up Fulgrim.
Oh jeez. Oh, but the new mini for him is so cool.
Oh, it is.
Both of them.
But I'm still going to slender him any chance I get.
Oh, completely deservingly too. I mean, there's no. Speaking of characters that can't be defended, he's right at the top of the list. But oh, he's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, hey, what? This sword looks very, very suspicious and dangerous looking. Let me pick it up anyways.
It wants me to kill my closest friend and dearest brother? Oh, well, it is a pretty cool looking sword. Well, I hate to cut things short here with you, man. My buddy actually just got back from the hospital, so I gotta check in on him here.
Yeah, we've covered as much as I'd be able to, but thank you for doing this particular experiment. This was a interesting way to put Pen to the test. And I hope to have you on again for whatever comes next.
Hey man, I'm excited. I really appreciate the chance to kind of flex the system a little bit. I hope you like the results. We'll have to, put it to the test in a battle at some point. But I've got more stuff coming down the pipeline, including another book for the Wargame. So I hope that we can chat about it here at some point.
Yep. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
Om